The night was quiet, the kind of calm suburban silence that usually wrapped the neighborhood after 10 p.m. The homeowner, David, turned onto his street with a mix of exhaustion and relief. After 3 long months on a grueling business trip overseas, all he wanted was to sleep in his own bed, eat his own food, and feel the comfort of home again. He hadn't told anyone he was coming back earlier than planned. Even his neighbors thought he'd be gone another 2 weeks. As he slowed in front of his driveway, something felt off immediately. His porch light, which he always kept off while away, was on. Through the blinds, he could see faint flashes of television light. Even more alarming, a beat-up old sedan he didn't recognize was parked crookedly right where his car usually sat. David's stomach sank. Had someone broken in? He cut the engine, grabbed his suitcase handle like a weapon, and cautiously walked up the path. Music pulsed faintly from inside, rap beats, bass shaking the walls. He frowned. He lived alone, and no one was supposed to be here. When he turned the key, he noticed the lock resisted slightly, as though it had been used more than usual. Pushing the door open, he froze in shock. His once tidy living room looked like a college dorm disaster zone, beer cans scattered, pizza boxes on the coffee table, and shoes kicked into the corner. And then he heard it, laughter, followed by a curse yelled at the TV. Sitting on his couch, controller in hand, was a young man he didn't know well but recognized from HOA barbecues. Karen's son. The same deadbeat who was always in trouble. David stood frozen for a moment, his suitcase slipping from his hand onto the floor with a heavy thud. The noise startled the young man on the couch, who jerked his head around. It was exactly who David thought it was, Kyle, the son of the neighborhood's self-proclaimed queen of the HOA, Karen. Kyle looked irritated rather than guilty. "Dude, you scared the hell out of me." "You weren't supposed to be back yet," he muttered, pausing his video game. His words sank into David's mind like poison. Not supposed to be back yet. What did that even mean? David's eyes swept over the room. His expensive rug was stained with soda, the couch cushions were misshapen, and one of his framed photos had been knocked sideways on the shelf. The kitchen behind him looked worse, fast food bags piled high, dirty dishes in the sink, and a smell of stale grease hung in the air. His once spotless home had been turned into a bachelor's den of chaos. "What are you doing in my house?" David demanded, his voice sharper than he intended. Kyle shrugged, leaning back as though he owned the place. "Relax, man. Mom said you'd be away for weeks. She gave me the key. Said I could chill here for a while." The arrogance made David's blood boil. Not only had Karen trespassed by using her HOA privileges to access his house, but her son was acting like this was some kind of hotel. David clenched his fists, fighting the urge to drag Kyle out by his collar. "You have exactly 10 seconds to get up and leave," David said coldly. But instead of moving, Kyle smirked, grabbed a soda can from the table, and cracked it open. "Nah. Mom's got this handled." Just as David was about to call the police himself, the front door swung open like it was her own house. In marched Karen, HOA clipboard in hand, her lips already pursed in disapproval. She didn't even knock. "David," she exclaimed, her voice dripping with false shock. "You weren't supposed to be back yet." David's jaw clenched. So that explains it. Karen wasn't even hiding her guilt. Before he could speak, she rushed on. "Listen, don't overreact. Kyle needed a place to stay. He's been having a rough time. It's only temporary." "Temporary?" David snapped, pointing toward the mess. "He's trashed my house, eaten my food, and made himself at home like a squatter. You had no right to let him in here." Karen rolled her eyes, her tone turning patronizing, as though David was a child being scolded. "Oh, don't be so dramatic. You have a big, empty house. Kyle needed a roof over his head. You weren't even using it." "That's not the point," David said, his voice rising. It's my property. You went behind my back, gave him access, and now you're standing here acting like I'm the problem. Karen crossed her arms, her chin jutting out defiantly. The HOA looks out for the community. You're part of this community, which means sometimes we share for the greater good. Honestly, you should be grateful I was watching your place while you were gone. Watching? David nearly laughed. You call this watching? He gestured to the chaos. This is trespassing, Karen. This is theft. Karen's face flushed red, but instead of apologizing, she pulled out her phone with a dramatic huff. Fine. If you're going to be unreasonable, I'll let the police handle this. They'll see you're overreacting. Karen's fingers flew across her phone as she paced the living room, deliberately raising her voice so David could hear every word. Yes, officer, it's an emergency. My son is being harassed in a home he's staying at temporarily. The so-called owner came back early and is threatening him. Yes, hurry, please. David stared at her in disbelief. Are you insane? You just called the cops on me in my own house. Karen smirked smugly, sliding her phone back into her bag. You'll see. They'll put you in your place once they hear the truth. You can't just throw Kyle out like a stray dog. 20 minutes later, red and blue lights flashed across the street. Neighbors peeked through blinds and some even gathered outside, curious about the commotion. 2 officers stepped up to the door, one tall and stern, the other younger but watchful. Karen rushed forward dramatically. Thank goodness you're here. This man broke in and is threatening my son. He doesn't even belong here right now. David held back a bitter laugh. Officers, this is my house. I just returned from an overseas trip. She gave her son unauthorized access while I was gone. Look around, does this look like a guest, or a squatter? The officers exchanged looks. Sir, do you have proof of ownership? Without hesitation, David pulled out his driver's license, mortgage papers he still kept in his desk, and finally, his phone. With a few taps, he brought up security camera footage. Clear as day, it showed Karen unlocking his door weeks ago and letting Kyle inside with boxes of belongings. The officer's expressions hardened. One turned to Karen. Ma'am, we need to talk about what you've done here. This is looking a lot like trespassing. Karen's confident mask cracked, her voice suddenly shaky. Wait, this isn't what it looks like. The younger officer gestured toward Kyle, who was now slouching deeper into the couch, trying to act invisible. Son, grab your things. You're leaving this house tonight. Kyle groaned. But where am I supposed to go? That's not our concern, the officer replied firmly. You're not welcome here. If you don't move now, you'll be leaving in handcuffs. Karen's face turned crimson as she spun toward David, desperate to salvage her control. You're heartless. He's my son, he had nowhere else. You could have helped him. This is what neighbors do. David kept his tone icy. Neighbors don't break into homes, Karen. Neighbors don't steal keys and dump their problems on others. You abused your HOA privileges, and you thought I'd just roll over. The taller officer cut in, his voice calm but stern. Ma'am, you're lucky he's not pressing full charges. Entering a home without permission, handing out keys, and lying to the police. That could land you with criminal charges. He paused, letting his words sink in. Consider this a warning. Next time, it won't end with just embarrassment. With the officers watching, Kyle reluctantly stuffed his belongings into a torn duffel bag and slunk out the front door. Karen followed behind, still muttering excuses, but the stares from gathered neighbors silenced her. Word of what happened would spread through the community by morning, the HOA queen caught red-handed. David locked the door behind them and exhaled, finally reclaiming the silence of his home. He looked around at the mess, tired but oddly satisfied. Tomorrow, he'd change the locks, upgrade his security system, and make sure Karen's access to anything was revoked. As for Karen, her reputation in the HOA crumbled overnight. No longer feared, she became the subject of whispers and side eyes. And Kyle? He disappeared from the neighborhood as quickly as he had invaded it. For David, it was more than just a victory, it was a message. His home was his sanctuary, and no one would take that from him again.